Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kazu here, and today I have a video for you on the complete guide to Illithid Powers, how to unlock them, what you can do with them, and how absolutely insanely busted these powers are. So, if you are having trouble with Baldur's Gate 3 and you want to tap into the dark side, stay tuned for the rest of this video because we're going to be covering some incredible ways to bolster your character in and out of combat. Alright, so for those of you who are new to the game, in Baldur's Gate 3, the entire premise is that you've been infected by a Mind Flayer parasite, which is going to turn you into a Mind Flayer, and you're trying to find a cure on how to remove this parasite. But, at the same time, the parasite gives you access, potentially, to some unique abilities which really make your character stand out amongst the rabble and become a devastating force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. I am going to explain how to get them in just a moment, but just giving you kind of a breakdown, you can see here we have this large skill tree of essentially our Illithid powers, where every time we acquire a brain parasite, either from loot or from killing an enemy, we can then use these and spend them on new skills and new passive abilities, which will enhance our character. And before we begin, of course, you might be wondering, well, what kind of powers am I actually going to get access to that's going to make my character busted or OP? We have Luck of the Far Realms, which I think a lot of people think is the strongest one at the start, because it lets you basically turn a successful attack roll into a critical hit once per day. Very strong on paladins, very strong on rogues, etc. That's a good feature, but there's Perilous Stakes, which is even better. It makes an enemy vulnerable to all damage. This is going to be on a failed intelligence saving throw, which more often than not is actually pretty good. And being vulnerable to all damage, it doesn't override a nullification of damage types, but it does override resistances and things like that. It's super busted. This ability is so broken. And then we also have things like Mind Blast, which is literally the Mind Flayer ability to, in an AoE cone, stun and deal damage to enemies. We have things as well like the Dark Hole or the Black Hole, which is going to pull in and slow enemies. So there's tons of super powerful abilities. I've already shown it to you guys in the beginning intro. And yeah, we're going to get straight into the video now on how you can get Illithid powers. Alright, so as you're playing through Baldur's Gate 3, you're going to notice that you have an Illithid dialogue option that comes up in conversation sometimes. It is a wisdom ability check, and it's very easy to pass. These are going to let you mind control enemies, and after using them a couple times, you're going to have a dream sequence, which, without spoiling anything, is going to give you the option to unlock and tap into your Illithid powers. However, you can't actually get access to new abilities until you run into your first Mind Flayer parasite. So in the case here, we opened up a Mind Flayer parasite specimen from the enemy we killed, and you can see here now we have an option to actually open your mind to the tadpole. And once you do that, there's going to be a little cutscene for it, and then after that, we finally unlock our Illithid power skill tree, which we can then use to upgrade our abilities and unlock new abilities and features. Alright, so once you unlock the skill tree, of course you're going to notice that we have our Illithid Persuasion at the start, and then you have this first ring, which once you upgrade any one of these powers, you'll get access, or you'll start to get access to the second ring, the second tier of powers. However, the third tier of powers, you're going to notice is locked when you unlock this skill tree, and that's because you have to wait until the end of Act 2. Without spoiling anything, you're going to have to wait until the end of Act 2, and then you'll be given a dialogue option to pick if you want to tap into this Illithid power more, or if you want to reject it and not go further down into the route of a Mind Flayer. So it does change your appearance a little bit, really not that much. It's not going to make you look like a Mind Flayer, you just look way scarier. But yeah, without spoiling anything, you do have access to this full skill tree by the end of Act 2. So once you get into Act 3, that's when you can really pop off with your Illithid powers. And breaking down the actual powers themselves, I'm not going to go over every single one in detail, but we are going to highlight and discuss the ones that I think are the most powerful over the course of my 50-60 hour playthrough. So starting with Illithid Persuasion, we have that unlocked already. Don't have to worry about that. I think for the first tier of powers you're going to see here, Psionic Overload is one that's really strong with characters who can attack multiple times. So if you have someone who has extra attack, maybe like a fighter, or if you have a monk who has Flurry of Blows, you get an additional 1d4 psychic damage per hit but you also take 1d4 psychic damage every turn. That damage is negligible when comparing yourself to being able to attack like 3 to 4 times per turn. Getting an extra 1d4 on each hit means that you would get an extra 3d4 to 4d4 damage per turn. It actually starts to add up a lot very quickly. Strong ability early on. I highly recommend this one. And then we also have Favourable Beginnings, which allows you to add your proficiency bonus to the first attack roll or ability check that you make against any target. And it comes up surprisingly more often than you would think. So it's a big bonus. Proficiency bonus is going to be +2 at levels 1 through 4, +3 levels 5 through 8, and then +4 going after levels 9 and above. So this is a big bonus. It basically gives you expertise, but it stacks with expertise. So it's a very good bonus. Definitely recommend you take Favourable Beginnings and Psionic Overload. This one's more so if you have people who are going to be attacking a lot. And then in our second tier of Illithid Powers, we have Luck of the Far Realms, which I've already mentioned. When you make a successful attack roll, you get to turn it into a crit. So this only lasts once per long rest. So once per day, you have access to this ability. Incredibly potent because, of course, you get to pick when you land crits. And crits for classes like the Paladin, who can just stack smites, they can stack smite spells, they can output a stupid amount of damage with just this one single passive feature. So it's very strong. Of course, I do recommend you take it. But don't sleep on Perilous Stakes. I've already made a previous video where I used Perilous Stakes against a boss that had 600 HP, and I killed them in one turn with Perilous Stakes because I made them vulnerable to all damage. It doesn't always work. It is going to be an intelligence save, even though it doesn't say it here. This ability targets intelligence, so use this against enemies that have low intelligence. And the status of making the enemy vulnerable means that it will turn their resistances into vulnerabilities, which is really strong. It will not override any of their damage nullifications or damage immunities that they might have. So keep that in mind. Still a really strong ability overall. We also have an ability called the Shield of Thralls, which I haven't touched yet, but this ability is really interesting. You conjure a volatile shield around yourself, which gives 10 temp HP, but if that temp HP is broken and the shield is popped, the shield explodes and it stuns both you, or both the person who has Shield of Thralls cast on them, as well as enemies that are nearby. It sounds terrible because it stuns yourself, but you can actually put this on weak allies such as familiars or zombies or thralls, and then throw them into the battlefield, have them get the shield popped by provoking an opportunity attack or taking a hit, and then they can explode the shield and stun enemies around them. So it's actually incredibly strong. This is an intelligence save to be stunned, so most enemies are going to get stunned by this ability, and stunning, if you don't know, is a hugely powerful status effect. It just wastes the enemy's turn, basically. And you have advantage to hit them when they're stunned. Next up, we have Psionic Backlash. It's a good use of your reaction to deal damage to spellcasters if you're not making opportunity attacks or if you don't have anything else to use your reaction on. Not a bad feature at all. Call the Weak is terrible early on because it scales off of how many evolved Illithid powers you have. But you're going to notice later on, look at my skill tree right now, if you have a ton of abilities upgraded, Call the Weak can actually be really good for mobbing enemies. We have Repulsor next, which is going to be an AoE pushback. It is actually surprisingly quite useful. You're going to notice that this is a 6 meter AoE around yourself, so you can push a huge group of enemies away. It's going to push them 6 meters. You can push them off ledges, off cliffs, things like that. 2d6 force damage, not bad for in action. Again, later on, you're going to probably find better things to do with your action, of course, but early on, it is quite a useful tool. We have Displace. Increases the falling damage of enemies because of your actions by 1d8 psychic damage. It's alright, I wouldn't recommend it. Then we have Charm. This one, also very situational. You get to use your reaction to charm an enemy, preventing them from attacking you until the end of their next turn. This is really useful against enemies that have multiple attacks. But in many other cases, you're not going to find good use for it, so it's highly situational. Depends if you really want that one or not. And then next up we have Ability Drain, which once per turn, when you make an attack roll, reduces target's corresponding ability by 1. This is honestly pretty useful. It's once per turn. It's a passive feature. You can take it if you want. I don't notice it really benefiting my characters or not, so I don't recommend it if you have other important abilities such as Perilous Stakes and Shield of Thralls to take, but it is a passive feature, so it doesn't hurt you to take. Stage Fright is the last one of the second tier, which is going to be an AoE fear. Essentially, when enemies are targeted by this, it's not actually a fear. They're going to have disadvantage on their attack rolls, and they take psychic damage when they miss. But as soon as they land an attack, they will overcome their stage fright. So on Tactician difficulty, this is a bad ability because enemies already get an additional bonus to land attacks. Even with disadvantage, you'll find that enemies are landing attack rolls fairly often because they have such high bonuses to attack. So I don't really recommend this one. Again, for tier 2, we want Perilous Stakes, Luck of the Far Realms, and Shield of Thralls. Situationally, things like Psionic Backlash, Call the Weak, and Repulsor, as well as Charm, are pretty decent as well. Alright, so going around to now the third tier of abilities. These are the ones that you will not have access to until very minimum at the start of Act 3. So you're going to get these late into the game, but to counterbalance that, it's because they are really strong abilities. So starting off, actually on this side, going off from Luck of the Far Realms, we have Illithid Expertise. This is going to give you expertise in Persuasion, Deception, and Intimidation checks, which, if you are not playing a Bard or Rogue, is incredibly useful, especially because by the time you're in Act 3, your proficiency bonus is going to be +3 or +4. So having expertise in these skill checks means that you get to add your proficiency bonus twice, not just once, but you actually get to double it on these skill checks. So instead of, if you have a PB of +3 because you're level 8, then you get to add +6 to persuasion checks with this. If you have a proficiency bonus of +4 because you're level 9 or higher, you get to add a +8 minimum to your persuasion ability checks, not including your charisma score. So really powerful. Really recommend that you get this one as soon as possible because it will help you out a lot, especially if you're not a Bard. If you are a Bard, you don't have to worry about this feature as much, but if you're not playing a Bard, chances are you don't have expertise in these skills. Next up, we have Fracture Psych. Invade a target's mind, disrupt their defenses, reduce armor class by 1, and then you can cast it again if the target dies. This is an action. It's an intelligence save. It's pretty bad. It's not high enough impact for you to really warrant running it, unless there's some sort of crazy synergy I'm not thinking of, but as far as I know, pretty bad. So next up we have the Displacer Beast shape, which is basically a wild shape, but specifically into a Displacer Beast, which is a monster and not a beast, as far as I'm aware. It actually might be considered a beast, but anyways, you can see here, we basically get the wild shape into the Displacer Beast, cool animation. And we get to play the Displacer Beast. Displacer Beast is going to have access to Illusory Copy, which is actually really good. It lets you spawn basically a second version of yourself, which can still make attacks and whatnot. And then we also have Displace, which allows you to teleport to an enemy, leaving behind another Illusory Copy of yourself as a bonus action. And the base attacks for this form deal 2d6 plus 4 plus 2d6. So 46 plus 4 physical damage. It's not bad. I wouldn't say it's great compared to some of the other abilities, simply because the other abilities are busted. But if you want a wild shape into a Displacer Beast because it's badass, then this is definitely a go-to. And then next up we have Absorb Intellect, which lets you gobble up a foe's intellect, so you lower their intelligence by 1 per turn, and then you heal for 5 turns. It's 1d8 healing, -1 intelligence per turn. Honestly, it's a little too low impact for this to be warranted again. It lasts for 5 turns, which is nice, but 1d8 healing is nothing compared to the damage that you're probably going to be taking over the course of 5 entire turns. So I wouldn't really recommend it. It is going to lower intelligence to make your intelligence saving throw abilities, all of the Illithid Powers, a little bit better, but again, too slow to really work. Freecast, extremely strong. It's a passive feature that you get to toggle on and off, and it works once per rest. But basically, whatever spell slots or charges or resources you're using for your next action or spell are removed, which means that essentially, if you want to cast Channel Divinity, you get to do it for free. If you want to cast a 6th level spell, you get to do it for free. It's busted. It doesn't work with smite spells and smites for some reason. I'm not really sure why, because I feel like it should work with it. But keep that in mind if you play a Paladin. Freecast doesn't really seem to be working with Paladin. It might be a bug, it might be unintentional, but at least for me, as far as my trying it, Freecast is really going to be used for things like casting high-level spells for free. Next up, we have Mind Sanctuary, which lets you sculpt a magical nexus that allows you to take actions and bonus actions interchangeably. So that's a really unique one. It lasts for 3 turns once per day. So we have Mind Sanctuary here, and we can use it on our entire party. And as you can see, when you're within this Mind Sanctuary aura, you can now use bonus actions and actions interchangeably. So we can actually, let's see if we have any good bonus action stuff we can look at. So we have Cure Wounds here. We're going to Cure Wounds. We used our action, but now we can use our bonus action to cast Cure Wounds. So we get to use our actions as bonus actions, and then we can also use our bonus actions as actions. So for someone like Sarion, who's playing a Ranger, he can use Hunter's Mark. That's going to consume his action, and then he still has a bonus action, which he could use for something like Ensnaring Strike. So that's really, really powerful. Mind Sanctuary, super useful. Again, you do have to stay within a sphere, which is kind of hard to do sometimes, and it's bugging out a little bit in terms of graphics for some reason over here. But pretty useful ability. It's definitely going to bolster your action economy and let you come up with some pretty insane combos too. So good ability, recommend that one as well. Next up we have is Mind Blast, which I've already shown lots of video footage for that. Basically, you deal 4d8 plus 3 psychic damage in a huge cone, and it's an intelligence saving throw that if the target fails, they get stunned. So they waste their turn. Super powerful, and there's going to be some synergy with another ability that I've already shown, but I'll talk about that in a sec. Next up we have is Fly. Class action, it just allows you to fly straight up. Your character now has the ability to fly 18 meters per turn, which is your base move speed. Like, it's really strong. Again, also highly recommend, especially for melee characters. Even if you play range characters, having access to flight at all times, busted, really good. Now we have Black Hole, which is by far my favorite ability of the Illithid Powers because it's so wild and crazy. It basically pulls in a huge group of enemies, and it also slows them, meaning that they get affected by literally the slow spell pretty much. It's going to reduce their movement speed. It's going to make it so they can't take reactions. They can only take 1 action per turn, or 1 attack action per turn. And it also lets you recast this ability for the next 5 turns, which is insane. Because you get this back on short rest. So Black Hole is basically an ability you can use to cluster groups of enemies together so that you can cheese them with AoE. It will make spells like Lightning Bolt 10,000 times more effective because you can group enemies into a tight bunch so that you can hit them with a single line AoE effect or a cone AoE effect, whatever makes it easier. You can Black Hole an enemy group, and then you can Mind Blast them to stun all of them if your character is hasted and has 2 actions to do both. Or you could Mind Sanctuary and then Black Hole and then also Mind Blast as interchangeably an action or a bonus action. So there's some wacky combos you can do with Black Hole. It is really strong, and it's hilarious to just pull in enemies. You can pull them to their deaths. You can pull them into explosions, into other sorts of area of effect spells. It's an intelligence save, so they fail it most of the time. And yeah, it's just such a cool ability. So next up we have Psionic Dominance. Basically when an enemy within 18 meters targets you with a spell of a level that is lower or equal to your proficiency bonus, which at level 9 is going to be 4, you can use your reaction to nullify the spell. You can basically, this is counterspell, but without having to be a spellcaster, without having to use spell slots. Once a day, you just basically get to counterspell people up to a spell level, up to your proficiency bonus. So again, at level 9, you get to counterspell up to level 4 spells, which is a lot of spells. So really strong feature. I do recommend that one a lot. It is quite useful. And we're back to Illithid Expertise. So as you can see, for the highest tier of the skill tree, pretty much all of the abilities are really good. The only ones I wouldn't recommend is Absorb Intellect or Fracture Psych. I think both of these are just way too slow to ever see use. But the rest of these abilities are just incredibly powerful, high impact, and very useful in many situations. So, I mean, I think the Black Hole you should take first. Well, actually, I think Illithid Expertise you should take first, followed by either Black Hole or Mind Blast or even Fly. All of these are just going to be very high impact and kind of just win you the battle in the first turn, if you can either suck in an entire group of the enemy and then hit them with a huge AoE spell, or hit a large group of enemies with Mind Blast and stun them and waste their turn, or set up for a big combo with Mind Sanctuary, etc. There are just so much potential for crazy plays with the Illithid Powers. Alright, so going over, I think what would be one of the most important questions for people who are considering taking Illithid Powers, which is mechanically speaking and lore-wise speaking, what are the downsides to actually acquiring these powers? It doesn't really affect you until the end of Act 2, where you get to choose if you want to actually fully commit to the Illithid Powers and upgrade them to become even stronger. Once you do say yes to that, it will lock you into a specific ending. I'm not going to spoil what kind of outcomes or what kind of ending this is, but I think a lot of people are going to dislike that sort of, it is going to be a darker sort of ending for your character if you choose to go the Illithid Power route. However, if you're playing a character that roleplay-wise, their values and beliefs, they might actually tap into the dark side to gain the strength they need to defeat their foes, then I think the Illithid Power route is totally fine. From a metagaming point, there's no downsides mechanically speaking. Like, you don't get punished stats-wise for going Illithid. People's opinions of you don't really shift that drastically if you go Illithid. It does shift it a little bit, but not enough that it would actually affect you or your gameplay. So metagaming wise, there's no downsides. It's busted. It's OP as hell. If you want to actually just get an edge up on your foes, or if you're having a really hard time in Tactician, like, the Illithid Powers will make it so much easier. I can't wait to actually do another run of this game without the powers, to see what kind of other strategies I got to come up with, because I'm not gonna lie, in Act 3 I have become a little bit reliant on blacking hole, or using black hole on enemies and then hitting them with a lightning bolt that I use Channel Divinity Destructive Wrath on to just instant kill like entire groups of enemies. It's hilarious. It is busted. But yeah, again, if you don't want to deal with those sorts of moral or ethical constraints with the Illithid Powers, then avoid it altogether. If your character you think would be okay with taking that choice, with acquiring these dark and alien powers, then by all means, I do think they are really, really awesome and a lot of fun. So ultimately, the decision is going to be up to you guys, whether or not you want to use these powers. But just keep in mind, if you do want to use the powers, man, you're going to have access to some amazing abilities and features as showcased in this video. And that's going to be pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. It always helps out. And if you did enjoy any of the information presented in this video and the content that I bring forth, then again, do make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notifications button. That way you'll get notified when I upload more content. And I do plan on making more Baldur's Gate videos. I'm nearing the end of my playthrough. I'm probably gonna like redo a few fights, redo a few endings to mess around with things before going into my next playthrough, which again will still be on Tactician difficulty. And I am gonna start working on some build videos too, so look forward to that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day and week.